Hi, guys. Hopefully, can everybody hear me and see me okay? I've been keeping up with the conversations you guys have been having while we were getting ready to get started. And some of you asked some really good questions, made some really great points that I want to touch on before we get started. Let me see, I wrote some down. Oh, Mercury Chan. Mercury was saying, she was asking, does anyone ever feel frustrated with magic and then all of a sudden experience like a great leap forward? You know, one day you're just like, I'm never going to get this, or I'm never going to figure this out, or I'm sick of doing this for the millionth time. I've already got everything out of it. What am I going to get out of this that I haven't already got? You know, feeling that. And then all of a sudden, you know, the next day it's like something clicks into place and you're excited about it again and you understand it on a whole new level. And, you know, just all of that sort of thing, you know, that feeling of kind of being fed up a little bit and then all of a sudden making a big leap. You'll experience that over and over and over again in magic. That is part of the path, to be honest. You know, it's like we talk about, there will always be a time of restriction before expansion. You know, and the example I gave before a while ago was a bow and arrow. You know, when you're getting ready to shoot an arrow from a bow, you have to pull it back before you can release it, pull it back before it can go anywhere. Well, the more you pull it back, the further it's going to go whenever you do release it. That's the restriction before the expansion. And, you know, think about it in the terms of even like in biblical terms, like Christ on the cross. You know, when he's on the cross, he's saying, you know, one of the last things he says, not the last thing, but one of the last thing he said was, "It is finished." But one of the last things that he said is, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" He felt an incredible pressing, you know, crushing sense of restriction at that moment. You know, you think you're frustrated. This is a guy who's hanging there nailed to a tree, dying, while people who love him are standing there watching. You know, that's the ultimate period of restriction. But if he would not have went through that period of restriction, then there could not have been the resurrection. There could not have been the period of expansion later. You know, all of these things tie into magic. Andrew says, is part of that the ego resisting the change you are making in your life? Sometimes it is. It can very well be. Other times it's more of, think about whenever you go to work out. You know, if you like say you hit the same exercise, you know, even though you're not supposed to do this, but sometimes say you hit a plateau where you're doing a bench press and you can't get further, you know, you can't do any more reps, you can't lift any more weight, you're just stuck at one spot. Well, if you hit that same exercise for 3 days back to back, you're not going to grow right then. But if you rest for a week and a half after you do that, when you go back to the gym, you're going to notice a difference in your body. Sometimes our energy system, sometimes our soul has to have time to rejuvenate, to rest. This is the whole thing in the Bible. It says, you know, even God rested on the seventh day. Whenever you're doing magic, you are pushing your energy system. You are putting some of your life force into it. So you have to have time to rest and recuperate. Let me see. There was a couple other things. Someone was asking about correspondences, and they were saying, you know, talking about using flashcards and memorizing all of these different correspondences. And honestly, and I saw the baked nurse, Marilyn. She said that she is no good at just straight memorizing things. The way that she learned is through doing it practically. That's the same thing for me. That's the exact same way that I learned it. You know, I'm no good at just sitting. This is why I was a terrible student in school. Because if you just give me a bunch of pointless crap to memorize, I'm never going to do it. Never going to be able to do it. It just don't stick. I don't see any connection there that makes it stay in my head in any way. So what I mean by using it in a practical way, Marilyn brought up like carving a sigil on a candle. So here's an easy way to use magic to memorize the correspondences. Start thinking, go through your life one thing at a time and start thinking about what you want to change in your life. What is it you want to work on first? Yes, Vegas Vamp says application. That's exactly what we're talking about here, applying it. So think about one thing a week. Work on one thing a week. This is something that we also do in the higher levels of magic, where you'll do like a 40-day operation, just focused on one thing. But think about one thing per week in your life that you want to change. And let's say, for example, to start off with, it's your finances. So you're not doing so well financially. So think about what correspondence would I use to do magic for finances? Now, you can go about this in a whole bunch of different ways. Number one, you can go about it from an elemental perspective, which is what you start on in the lower grades. So where do finances fall in the realm of the elements? Finances would correspond to earth. You've got earth, air, fire, water. Finances correspond to earth. Remember, in tarot, earth is the pentacles cards, and pentacles represent anything you can touch, smell, taste, feel with your hands. Our finances, things we own, our flesh and blood bodies, all of those are correspondences of earth. So what's the color associated with earth? Green. Yellow is air, red is fire, blue is water, green is earth. So if you wanted to use the elemental scheme, the elemental map, you get a green candle. Who is the archangel associated with earth? Uriel. So Uriel is the archangel that you would invoke. We're also going to get into later, first thing to memorize is just the archangels. That's the easiest and the most important. But you also have an angel, you have an elemental ruler, you've got a whole bunch of stuff associated with each element. But just start with the archangel. So if you're going to do earth, you're going to do Uriel. So, look up the Theban alphabet and carve Uriel's name in your green candle. And then charge it with the energy of earth. Charge it with green light, because that's the energy of earth. Say, on the other hand, you want to use planetary correspondences, which, to be honest, most magicians, after they get past a certain point, will only use elements as like supplemental energies. For the most part, they're going to focus on one of two things, either planetary energies or tree of life energies, and they very much tie in together. So let's say, for example, you're wanting to use planetary energies. What's the planetary energy associated with finances? Not just finances, but growth of finances. Expansion. Yes, Shane. Shane says Jupiter. That's exactly right. So what color is the planetary energy of Jupiter? What's the correspondence color? Blue. So you would get a blue candle. Who's the archangel of Jupiter? Sachiel. Sachiel. So you would carve Sachiel's name in the blue candle, charge it with blue energy of Jupiter for your finances to expand. Let's say if you want to use the tree of life, which is what I personally use most of the time. On the tree of life, you would do the same thing. What's the energy on the tree of life? What's the sphere on the tree of life associated, again, like Jupiter, with expansion? It would be Hesed, the blue sphere. So again, you would get a blue candle. Who's the archangel of Hesed? Zadkiel, Tzadkiel. Carve that on your candle. Once again, what's the God name associated with Hesed? El. So whenever when you're doing things like drawing your hexagrams or your pentagrams, whatever you're going to use over your candle, when you're charging it, when you're vibrating the God name, you would vibrate the name El, because that's the correspondence. So you see what I mean? It's easier to figure this stuff out. It's easier to stick in your head. It's easier to make a lasting impression with it if you're actually trying to use it. And Amanda says, this is all a foreign language to me. It will feel that way to everyone in the beginning. When you first read, and this is something else we're going to touch on in just a second. Somebody was asking about the book list. And the number one book on the book list that you're going to want to get, even though you are not going to understand much of anything in this book in the beginning, it is going to be completely and absolutely over your head if you're just starting. It's that way for everyone. You're going to want to get, some people call it the Black Brick. This is the new edition of this book, The Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie. Or technically it's by The Golden Dawn, but Israel Regardie leaked it. He was the one who published this. See how thick that is? Now there's two books, two versions of this book. There's this one, and this is one I keep just for reference and just for reading. Like if I'm sitting here and I'm wanting to read or whatever, if I'm wanting to like refresh my memory about a knowledge lecture, or sometimes I'll just flip it open at random and read whatever I come across. This is the one I'll use. But when I'm actually doing magic and it's something that I haven't committed to memory, I will use the paperback, and you can see I've used it so much, both the front and back cover have fallen off of it. But this is the same book. It's just a paperback version. And, I use the paperback just because you can hold it in your hand while you're doing magic. It's a lot lighter. This thing is heavy as hell. But talking about what Amanda just said about how this is all like a foreign language to her. The guy who taught me a lot, the guy who tutored me, we were talking one time about whenever he first picked up this book. He said it was like trying to read an alien language. And it is, there's a lot of it that's not going to make any sense to you. The reason for all of the other books on our book list will be to help you make more sense of this one. So speaking about the book list for a second, this is something I thought of a few days ago, maybe a week ago, actually. We're going to work our way slowly but surely through bits and pieces of the entire book list. I'm not going to sit here and read the whole things to you, just because if you wanted that, you could just buy the audio book. But I will take the major books and hit the high points of them because they will be pertinent to the things that we're discussing. So one of those books, and you might have thought you escaped from this guy, that we finally made it past him, but he will come back. Franz Barden, Initiation into Hermetics. Like I said, you might have thought we were done with him, but he's going to come back to haunt you again. This guy breaks stuff down in incredibly, profoundly simple ways so that anyone can do it. This is a man who survived the Holocaust in Nazi Germany with magic. He used magic to survive in concentration camps. This is a man who knows what the hell he is talking about. This is a man who put these things into practice in life or death situations, who had to rely on these to survive. So he's one that we're going to revisit again and again. This is a very wise man. This is not an armchair magician. This is someone who went through absolute hell and used magic to do it, to come out the other side. So we will be good. You can see I still got all kinds of markers in it, but we will come back to this guy. But what we're on right now, let me see if there's anything we want to touch on before we go on to what we are on right now. One other thing. But first, what we're on right now, what we've been covering the past few live streams, we've been covering like the supernatural world. Everything from vampirism to demons to the fae. We've been covering all of that stuff. And like I said, we've only been hitting the high points. This is a book. Don't let the name of it throw you off. The name of it sounds silly. It sounds even almost childish, but this book is incredibly helpful in allowing you to understand how magic works. Not just, the things we've been talking about, the supernatural or the paranormal or whatever you want to call them. But things like the way reality is structured, all of that, even the beginnings. We're going to go back into this tonight for about things about defense against like supernatural entities, intelligences, spirits, things that exist on other levels of reality. We're going to go back to that tonight because it is going to be the bridge that takes us into the next topic we're going to be talking about, which is natural magic. We're going to be talking about the differences between ritual magic and natural magic because they go hand in hand. They're not the same thing. Anyone can do natural magic. Not everyone can do ritual magic, just like not everyone can do martial arts or not everyone can do, draftsmanship. These are things that you have to be trained to do. These are things that you have to learn, usually from a teacher. That's what ritual magic is. It requires a lot of practice, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment. Natural magic, on the other hand, is using the energies inherent in items in the natural world. Herbs, resins, incenses, all of those kinds of things. And we're going to go into why those are important, all of that kind of stuff. That's what we're going to go into. But this book is by John Michael Greer, Monsters by John Michael Greer. And while you're at it, the other thing, what we're going to go into next, and this is another one that you may as well order if you're on a book ordering binge, and you're going to, if you want to keep up with what we're talking about, because like I said, I'm not going to read the whole book to you. If you wanted that, you'd probably just get the audio book. But we will hit the high points and the things that are pertinent to the discussions that we're having. The next one that we're going to spring into from Monsters is another John Michael Greer book. This is called The Encyclopedia of Natural Magic. So that's another one that you'll want to add to your reading list. And this one, again, there's a bunch of books out there that are in the vein of Crowley's 777. 777 is not a book you just sit down and read. All it is table after table after table of correspondence. So you could look up, for example, Hesed on the Tree of Life, and you can follow through all of these tables, all the way through the book, all of these tables of correspondence. You can see what the angel is. You can see what the archangel is that corresponds to it. You can see what the color is that corresponds to it. You can see what the tarot card is that corresponds to. You can see what the Egyptian god is that corresponds to it. It just goes on and on and on, giving you these correspondences. It's not something you just sit down and read. Same way, this one you can read a little more. As a matter of fact, I've actually read this book several times. This is probably, I believe, the third copy that I've actually went through, just because I do read it so much. But this is also more of, it really is like an encyclopedia. You can look up all kinds of different herbs, and we'll get into that in just a minute. We'll go into that. Let me see if there was anything else. Oh, one other thing, and this pertains to magnum opus. I saw somebody, I can't remember who it was, and I can't remember what the context of the conversation was before we came on. They were talking about egregores. And this is one of the reasons why traditional orders and lodges are going to be very, very selective of who is allowed in and who's not, who is a good fit and who would belong on some other path or some other tradition or some other teacher or what have you. The reason for that is because every single order that exists, if it's a real order, if people have spent time doing this, this is something that members of an order do. They feed and strengthen an egregore that is connected to the order. Like, for example, the Golden Dawn, there is an egregore connected to the Golden Dawn. The real AA, there's an egregore connected to the AA. The point and purpose of this egregore, this is what an initiation is for. An initiation is to establish a link between you. This is part of what an initiation is for. An initiation establishes a link to you and that egregore. What it does is speeds up your development, as well as other things, like it actually offers you protection. It will try to protect people that are connected to it because they're feeding it. It will also retaliate against those who betray that order because they would be basically harming the egregore, and it's going to defend itself. This is why whenever you're taking the oath of secrecy, the oath to not reveal, number one, the fact that you're even in an order. Keep in mind, there are two kinds of secret societies. One is a society with secrets. The other is an actual secret society. And a society with secrets, for example, would be like the Masonic Lodge, the Masons, the Freemasons. Now, if you're a Freemason, you can tell people you're a Freemason. You can wear a ring that as soon as people see it, they automatically know that you're a Freemason. But you don't tell people the teachings. You don't tell people about the ceremonies, the rituals. You don't tell people necessarily about other members unless they want to, expose themselves. That is a society with secrets. A secret society, on the other hand, is one that you even tell people that basically says, if I reveal, my membership in the society, if I expose others who are members of this to, public scrutiny, if I reveal any of these teachings, then may my own magic turn against me, and may I be struck down like the Tower of Babel. That comes from the egregore. The egregore does that. The egregore is what will strike you. The egregore is what will enact that punishment. It's not like the members of the order are going to come and hunt you down or whatever. It's the egregore that will have detrimental effects on your life. So one of the reasons that orders are so selective, true orders, you've got things on the internet that'll take anybody and everybody that submits an application or that says they want to be a member or whatever. But real orders are very aware of how this egregore works, and there are rituals that they do and that people who are in the order do to feed and strengthen that egregore. Well, that egregore will take on the qualities and characteristics of the people who are connected to it. So, if you've got somebody who's an asshole, you don't want that. You don't want the egregore, taking on those qualities and characteristics. You don't want someone who's constantly causing drama. You don't want someone who's constantly, doesn't have a thought or a feeling inside them that they don't blast all over the internet. You don't want that kind of, but basically what that is ego. Think about it. A huge part of magic is knowing the why of things. Why? Becoming, everybody thinks they're conscious. They're not. Most people are behaving through these patterns of like unconscious, compulsive patterns that they follow over and over, that they don't even know the why of what's behind these things. They just do them. That's not conscious, that's unconscious. So I'll give you an example. The thing about people who like blast all their personal business all over the internet, they don't have a meal. They don't have a meal that they don't post pictures of for everybody to see. There's no reason for me to see what you had for dinner last night. Or they don't go to, a single place. They don't meet with a single person. They don't have a single workout. There's nothing in their life that isn't public domain. Well, part of becoming conscious is figuring out why. Why are you doing that? And there's a reason why you're doing that. Once you become conscious of it, then you don't do it anymore. It's like Jung, the psychologist, was talking about part of like anything from certain aspects of magic to psychotherapy. It's about making the unconscious conscious. Well, once you make the unconscious conscious, then you don't automatically fall into patterns of doing it anymore. So the thing about the why, this is a thing when you join an order at certain levels of initiation, you will be asked why? Why are you wanting to join? What is it you think you're going to get here? What's the reason you're here? And it cannot be, some answer some milky toast, formulaic answer that you read in a book somewhere, like, I want to help people. That's not something that would be accepted in the course of an initiation ritual. If that was something that was said, usually it would be stopped in mid-ceremony. They would say, go about your business, come back in another year. You have to know why you are doing things. You see what you guys are talking about. Yes, absolutely. Amanda is saying, is it okay to want to practice alone and be in a probation period for many years with magnum opus? Yeah, absolutely. That's your practice is not about belonging to an order. Your practice is about your own internal growth. It is. I mean, that's the whole reason that we're doing this work, is for that internal growth. But anyway, I'm going to stop because we're almost half an hour in, and we're going to go back to monsters for a minute, because we're going to talk about number one, basically self-defense, if you want to call it that, against entities, spirits, intelligences, what have you. Let me see. I'm going to start off with this one paragraph. And this is starting off talking about natural magic. In nearly all of the world's cultures, magical methods are the first and most important line of defense against the more destructive kinds of paranormal activity. There's a good reason for this. Monsters, as shown elsewhere in this book, are creatures of the subtle dimensions of existence. Those realms, the etheric, the astral, and mental, in the language of magical philosophy, that lie between the physical realm of sensory experience and the spiritual realm of transcendent reality. This is the same territory in which magic operates and in which it has its direct effects. So basically what he's saying here is, throughout all the different cultures of the world, the number one thing that people turn to whenever they are having difficulties, whenever they are having these traumatic experiences with non-human intelligences, non-human entities, when they're experiencing something that's frightening them, the number one thing that they turn to is magic. Practitioners of magic, or researching like natural ways of dealing with these things. That's because magic, to be honest, and when I'm saying magic in this sense, I mean everything from like the Catholic Church to ceremonial magic like we're doing, whatever it is. That's what we're talking about magic. That, as opposed to, say, for example, science. Nobody says my house is haunted, so let me call a scientist. The reason for that is because science is good for understanding one thing, and that is the hardcore flesh and blood material world, the physical world. Science does not understand anything above that, anything beyond that. They are not, science is a child of the human intellect. It has not reached a level of development yet where it's going to be of much use for anything other than understanding the material plane of reality. If you want to understand these other levels of existence, how we interact with them, how they interact with us, how these other entities exist there, you're not going to find that in a science textbook. It is going to be through magic. Damian Draco says, is the mental and astral planes different, or is it the same thing? They're different things. The mental plane is higher than the astral plane. It goes physical, etheric, astral, mental, and spiritual. And different things, whenever you're invoking different things, correspond to different levels. Like, for example, when you're invoking elementals, you are invoking entities, intelligences that exist on the etheric level of reality. When you are invoking archangels, you are invoking entities that exist on the mental level of reality, the level right above the highest. So you've got all these different things on different levels. So, just that real quick. And he goes on, he says, these techniques are no more than a small sample of the full armamentarium of magical methods. Partly this is a matter of space, but it's also important to note that many of the more potent magical methods require a great deal of systematic training and practice in order to use them. Like any other art, magic has its basic, its intermediate, and advanced techniques. And beginners who try to copy the methods of an adept usually end up creating a mess and nothing more. So what he's saying, number one, first off, the things that we're about to talk about now, these methods of protection against things like that, are by no means the only ones. There are other ones. There are many other ones. There are fields of magic that have dedicated their entire study to these basically defense and how these other levels of reality work and all of that sort of stuff. These are not all of them. These are just going to be a tiny hit here and there thing that you can use. The other one, he's talking about the difference between, he says, like any other art, magic has its basic, intermediate, and advanced techniques, and beginners who try to copy the methods of an adept usually end up creating a mess and nothing more. That's what I was talking about a while ago, about how there's a difference in natural magic and ritual magic. Ritual magic takes a lot of time and effort and training to be able to do. That's what you're starting on when you're doing like the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, and the middle pillar. Those are the two basic exercises that every person beginning this path starts with, because they are the first steps in learning to do ritual magic, of how to manipulate this energy that most people don't even know exists. Natural magic, on the other hand, is something that anybody can do. Like when we're talking about iron, for example, how iron disperses etheric energies. It basically causes them to implode whenever they come in contact with it. You don't have to be able to do anything to use that. You can just use iron. You can use, there are laws to it. It's not something that you just make up as you go along. You have to learn the properties of all of these things. You have to learn yes, Jacob Hansen says red oil. Exactly. You have to learn the properties of metals. You have to learn the properties of herbs. You have to learn the properties of resins. It's not something that you just pull out of a hat. Let's see. Oh, then he starts talking about how the magical universe is constructed. He says each of the levels of being corresponds to a different set of energies. Those of the spiritual and mental levels are not particularly relevant to the needs of the student of paranormal or supernatural lore, although they have a great deal of importance in other branches of magical work. The reason he says that is because almost every single thing that you come in contact with in like a supernatural, frame of reference, like anything from a ghost to a demon to, the fae, whatever it is, all of those things are going to exist on either the etheric level of reality or the astral level of reality. Those are the two main levels that, that's not necessarily true for magic. When we do magic, when we're learning to do magic, we're using all these levels. You're using the spiritual level, you're using the mental level, you're using the astral, all of them. But whenever you're dealing with supernatural entities, you are dealing with either the etheric or the astral. This is really, really interesting. And this is what I mean about how you need this book in order to understand more of how the universe works. He goes into tides of energy and how that affects like the supernatural realm. And this is, to me, this is infinitely fascinating. And it's a subject and a topic that you could spend your life studying and not uncover it all. But it says, these energies move constantly through a series of cycles and tides, talking about the etheric and the astral. These energies move constantly through a series of cycles and tides, affecting different parts of the world at different intensities on a moment-by-moment basis. The tides of astral energy move in step with the relationships of the sun, moon, planets, and stars to the earth. A point that is both the magical basis for astrology and the reason why the term astral, from the Greek astron, meaning star, was chosen for this level in the first place. So all of the movement of energy that takes place on the astral level of reality is dictated by celestial phenomena, by the movements of the planets, by the movements of the stars. And you'll have people, when we're talking, I'll give you one example. When people are talking about astrology sometime, they'll say, I don't believe that the planets have any effect on what goes on down here at all. Well, the more blatant, obvious ones, you can see, with your physical senses, you can see that the sun obviously affects life on Earth. It obviously affects cycles of growth and death. When you're talking about, spring, summer, autumn, winter, you see it in the trees, you see it in the grasses, you see it in the migratory habits of animals. You see that the sun has an obvious effect on life on this planet. Same with the moon. The moon is what controls the tides. It's what controls, whether the ocean is at high tide or low tide. Well, that's water. Your body is made almost entirely of water. So the moon is also going to have an effect on you, just like it has an effect on the tides. These are things that anyone can see with the naked eye. The other planets are going to be more subtle, but they're still there. They still have an effect on the astral and etheric levels of energy. The moon is more about etheric energy. Controlling etheric tides. The sun is going to be more about astral energy. It's going to control more of those tides. Let me see. The relation of these astral tides to monster lore or the paranormal or supernatural is complex. Some relatively recent research and a good deal of older lore suggests that the appearance and activities of at least some paranormal things correlates closely to particular astrological factors. A great deal of further work needs to be done in this area before anyone can say for sure what the connections might be, but they represent one of the more intriguing frontiers of paranormal research. The influence of the etheric level and its tides on monstrous phenomena is more certain. The substance of the etheric level has been described as a subtle fluid that permeates and flows through all things. Like matter in some ways, like energy in others, ether can be concentrated or dispersed by a number of means, and it can also take and hold patterns. These patterns form the templates on which the particles of physical matter collect to form the objects we perceive with our 5 ordinary senses. They also make up the organizing principle behind biological life and define the physical bodies of all living things. And we're going to go back and touch on some of this. I don't want to, belabor or beat it all to death because we're already up to 41 minutes, and I want to go into some of the actual things you can do. But let me see, what was it? Oh, he says the substance of the etheric level has been described as a subtle fluid that permeates and flows through all things. This is why, going back to Franz Barden, remember when Franz Barden talks about fluid condensers, using certain herbal concoctions as fluid condensers? That's what he's talking about, etheric energy. He is talking about creating essentially tinctures or spagyrics that are concentrated etheric energy. The other thing is the patterns form the templates on which the particles of physical matter collect to form the objects we perceive with our 5 ordinary senses. Basically, what that means is every single thing that exists in the physical level of reality started off on these higher levels of reality first. Nothing just springs into existence physically. Take, for example, a building. A building begins on higher levels of reality, like the mental level of reality, because you have to conceive of the design, you have to plan it out. When you're doing that, you're not only creating it on paper, you are creating imprints for what you want to manifest in the physical world on the astral, which will then, or on the mental, which will then start to gradually come down and start to form on the astral, and then come down and start to form on the etheric. Basically, these other levels of reality are where we form the blueprints that will eventually become the physical world. Every single thought that you have will manifest in the physical world in some way or another, even if the only way it does so is through the firing of a synapse in your brain, this firing of an electrical impulse in the meat of your noggin. That is a thought manifesting in the physical world. Some of them manifest in more, higher, bigger ways, like some may manifest as the actual building. Some may never get beyond just a firing synapse. Let's see, like the astral, or for that matter, the physical oceans, the ocean of ether surrounding us has its tides and currents, its patterns of movement and cycles of energy. And these play an important role in nearly all kinds of magical practice. Various complex systems have been used to track these tides in various magical traditions, but the major influences on the ether's ebb and flow are a much simpler matter and follow patterns that are fairly well known even in our present culture. The most important of these derives from the phases of the moon. The moon dominates the etheric tides as it does the physical ones of the Earth's oceans. So, this explains, for example, why traditionally, whenever you're doing magic to manifest something, to make something grow, to make something start new, to make something, manifest in the physical world, you start when the moon is full or when the moon is waxing, when it's going towards full, because that's when these etheric tides are going to be at their highest point. When you want to get rid of something, when you want to banish something, when you want to bind something, when you want to get rid of something, you traditionally do those kinds of magic when the moon is dark or when it's waning, when it's going towards dark, when it's shrinking. That's when those tides are going to be at their absolute lowest points. The other thing is, I won't say that yet. I won't spoil it. Let me see. Let's see. The moon dominates the etheric tides as it does the physical ones of the Earth's oceans, and the cycle of lunar phases thus has a potent influence on all magical work directed at or through the etheric level. Etheric energies are at their strongest at the full moon and their weakest at the new. When the moon is waxing, growing from new to full, those energies support increase and upward motion, while the waning moon, shrinking from full to new, marks a time of decrease and downward motion. Basically what I just described to you, the different times you do different kinds of magic. And he talks a little bit about, I'm just going to read it to you. This plays an important part in magical practice, for the perceptive magician quickly learns what types of workings succeed best under different lunar conditions. The full and new moon and the 3 days immediately before each of these points are the most important stages of the cycle. The former is commonly associated with the appearance of many monstrous beings, particularly, but not only, and I'm not even going to tell you what he says because it sounds crazy. While the latter, which is called the dark or eld of the moon, was once greatly feared, as it is the most effective time for evil magic. These lunar cycles are paralleled by another set of patterns based on the daily and yearly positions of the sun. As the primary source of every kind of energy in the solar system, the sun floods the earth with a constant stream of ether. And this stream can effectively drown out other patterns in the etheric ocean. This is why, for example, ghosts and other etheric phenomena are rarely seen while the sun is above the horizon. Similarly, objects charged with etheric patterns will gradually lose their charge if exposed to unfiltered sunlight. This is why, for example, when you're reading books about crystals, things like that, stones, any ritual object that you use, one of the ways they tell you that you can cleanse these objects is by leaving it laying out in the sun for a few hours, because all of that flood of etheric energy the sun is sending down will blot out, erase all of the patterns that are in the ether on it. So, for example, you can actually deconstruct a talisman. If you leave a talisman laying out in the sun will eventually, just like if you leave, if you leave a book laying out in the sun, leave it laying out there, or if you have a picture hanging on your wall that's always with direct sunlight shining on it, you'll notice that as the months go by, that picture will become lighter and lighter and lighter because the sun is bleaching it out. It does the same thing to etheric patterns of energy. This is why the times of the year when you will find people report the most hauntings, the most paranormal or supernatural phenomena will be from like the middle of October through the middle of January. And the reason is because that's the time of year when, at least here in our hemisphere, you are receiving the least amount of sunlight. So it does not bleach those things out. They can grow stronger. They can grow more powerful. The times when people experience the least amount of paranormal or supernatural phenomena, at least in our hemisphere, is from like the middle of spring, around the March area, end of March, all the way around to like the beginning of July, because that's the time of year when the sun is just beating the hell out of us, beaming that etheric energy, or that the ether, that kind of energy down here. And that energy is what living things feed on. That's why plants grow from it. It's why, we get vitamin D from it, all that kind of stuff. At any rate, we're already 50 minutes in and we haven't even got to, let's at least start on natural magic. Let me see. The presence of astral and etheric forces in the very substance of the world we inhabit opens up a wide range of possibilities to the magician. Energies on these levels interact with the matter and energy of the physical level, but different kinds of matter interact in different ways. This is what I mean about how you're not just making this up. Like you can't just decide what kind of herb, just randomly pick one to do a thing. That's not how they work. You have to know the correspondences. You have to know what energy that herb or that liquid or whatever it is you're using represents. Some materials hold astral and etheric charges well, others poorly, while still others will erase such charges. So when we're talking about erasing such charges, once again, that's when you get to things like iron. That's when you get to things like vinegar. Those things will erase etheric energies. And still other substances affect the subtle levels in more specialized way. These effects are the basis for what magicians call natural magic. Natural magic relies not on the inner powers of the magician, but on the subtle relationships between physical substances and non-physical energies. Natural magic and ritual magic are thus two different ways of accomplishing magical work. And although they are not incompatible, in fact, properly used, they reinforce each other. They follow different laws and use different approaches. So there are laws to the way these things work. The use of crystals and metals as etheric condensers is one very common application of natural magic. An etheric condenser is like a battery, which can be charged with ether and then used as a source of power for etheric workings. Pure mineral crystals do this better than anything else. Pure metals also hold charge as well. Each metal corresponds in magical lore with one of the 7 traditional planets and will efficiently hold charges that are harmonious with that planet's nature. So one of my favorites, honestly, is copper. I use powdered copper that's been ground to powder, just like powdered iron, because powdered copper holds Venus energy or Netzach energy better than anything else. Gold is another one. Let me show you something real quick. You can get up, be back in 1 second. So gold, there are different ways you can use gold. We've talked about one in the past, but what I use for gold, this is gold chloride. And, this is basically liquid gold is what this is. This is not something that you may want to invest in just because it's relatively expensive. This isn't, if you're just planning on dabbling with this a little bit, you're probably not going to want to buy this, because a bottle of this size, this is going to cost you, this is very precious. This is going to cost you close to $100 for this. Normally they use this in photography studios. Like if they want to tint photographs a gold color, they'll use this. So you can get it at any photography studio or photography supply place, or you can also just, search for gold chloride online. Here's another thing though, if you don't want to, pay $100 for gold chloride, you can, but this is the energy of the sun, just like copper, holds the charge of Venus well, this will hold the charge of the sun. The other way that you can create your own condenser with energies for holding the sun's energy is just by getting some piece of gold jewelry. It should be at least 24 karat gold, and it could be anything. It could be a ring, it could be a locket, it could be any piece of gold jewelry. But basically, what you do is you get those glass baking pans. You get a glass baking pan and a pair of pliers, and you're going to want to wear gloves because it's going to get really hot. It works best if you've got either a torch, like a blowtorch, and you can get those anywhere, like a butane torch at hardware stores or what have you. Or if you have a gas burning stove, you can also do it on there. You take the gold jewelry, hold it with the pliers, and you get it red hot. And you fill your baking pan, your glass baking pan, full of water. Every time you get the gold red hot, you drop it into the water, let it sizzle, hiss, pop, let it sit until it's completely room temperature. Once it's room temperature, get it out, do it again. Heat it up all over again, drop it in the water, go through the same thing. When it's finally cool, take it out, heat it up on the stove, drop it in again. You're going to want to do this at least 10 times. What you're doing is every time you do that, you are saturating the water with a little more and a little more of the gold that it's, giving off whenever it's red hot. So, he's talking about metals. Still water, similarly, will hold etheric charges very effectively. Moving water, on the other hand, is an etheric eraser. A charged object immersed in running water will quickly be stripped of its charge. The purer and colder the water is, the stronger the effect. This is the basis for the tradition that ghosts and evil magic cannot cross running water. The use of holy water, which is water that has been consecrated, that has had consecrated salt dissolved in it, is a further application of the same principle. Holy water is typically flicked from the fingers, and the fine spray of droplets thus produced has a double effect. First, it sends moving water through any etheric patterns present in the area. Second, as the smallest droplets evaporate in mid-flight, they produce tiny salt crystals that, like any other crystal, will soak up whatever ether happens to be present. The combination makes holy water one of the more effective tools for magically cleansing a space, and a method for preparing and consecrating it will be given later. A subtler effect with similar uses involves evaporated acids. A shallow bowl half full of vinegar left out in a room will cause the ether present in the air to gradually lose any patterns it may contain. Stronger acids do the same thing more forcefully, although they should be diluted with water to prevent accidents. This is a good way to interfere with a haunting or other disruptive paranormal activity, as etheric entities cannot accomplish much in such an atmosphere and risk dissolution if they remain there for more than a short period of time. So basically, you can get rid of paranormal phenomena with vinegar. The thing about it is you can make it much more powerful. One of the things we're going to talk about, and we won't have time to do it tonight, we're going to keep going with the same topic the next time. We're going to talk about creating, how you make talismans with ritual magic. You can also create talismans with natural magic using specific kind of herbs and resins and things like that. One of the most powerful is St. John's wort. St. John's wort is the most solar of herbs. Now, like when we're talking about charging things, and how the first set of correspondences you learn are the elemental ones, and then the planetary ones, and then the zodiacal ones. Later on in magic, like one of in the higher levels of magic, what you start learning is how not only what planet corresponds with what type of energy, but how being in specific signs of the zodiac affects that planet's energy. Some of them are going to enhance it and make it stronger. Other ones are going to weaken it. Other ones are going to imbalance it and make it unstable. Different signs of the zodiac do different things. St. John's wort is the most solar of herbs. Not only does St. John's wort correspond to the sun, but it corresponds to the sun when it is in the sign of Leo. When the sun is in the sign of Leo, it greatly strengthens the sun's natural correspondences, the sun's natural energies. It also, St. John's wort corresponds to the elemental energy of fire. So if you if you're getting ready to charge St. John's wort in the higher levels of magic, you would charge it with fire, you would charge it with the sun, and you would charge it with Leo. Well, when you've got that solar St. John's wort, this is vinegar. This is St. John's wort in vinegar. And you don't want to use like plain white vinegar. White vinegar is made with all kinds of crap, all kinds of grains and things like that. You want to use, if you can, use a wine vinegar, apple cider vinegar, white wine vinegar, or red wine vinegar. One of those three things, because those are going to be like red wine vinegar is just going to be made with red wine, the red grapes. Same way with white wine. The apple cider vinegar is just made with apples. Like plain white vinegar, on the other hand, is it can have all different kinds of grains, and you don't know what those correspondences are or anything else. But if you soak an alchemical month is 40 days. You want to soak the St. John's wort in the vinegar for 40 days, and you have created something even that you can use. For example, if you scrub your floors and your walls with that, there's nothing coming in there. There's nothing on that level of reality that's going to be able to touch you in any way whatsoever. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop this tonight because we've got a lot more that we're going to talk about. But I'll tell you one last thing, one last incense. This is, we're talking about you can cleanse with vinegar. That's one way to, protect your home and protect yourself. If you're using this vinegar, especially if it's been, you're making a St. John's wort maceration out of it, which is what that's called. Another thing that you can do that embodies that same energy, that solar energy. Now, the sun corresponds, it's good not only for fire, but also the sun corresponds really well to air. So, that's what frankincense is. Frankincense is solar, it is elemental air, and it is the astrological sign of Aquarius. So you've got all of those in frankincense. That's why frankincense, when you burn frankincense, you're basically filling the air with energy that roughly corresponds to the same energy that's inherent in St. John's wort, which is solar energy. Okay, guys, and I'm running long. We didn't get nowhere near as far as I wanted to tonight, but that seems to always be the case. We're going to talk about, just skimming through, something we're going to talk about in the future is red oil, which somebody mentioned earlier, which is St. John's wort in olive oil. We're going to talk about salt. We're going to talk about creating holy water. We're going to talk about creating talismans and amulets with natural magic as opposed to ritual magic. That doesn't mean you can't use ritual magic on them. You use both. But these are all things that we are going to get into the next time. as we start to spring off into natural magic. Okay, guys, I hope you got something out of this. Um, thanks, guys. Let me see. Excellent. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for being with me again tonight, for wanting to hear this. And I'm looking forward to getting back into it. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.